Welcome to the Real Advisor Podcast, TRAP, Trap. Please follow us and join in the conversation on Twitter @Advisor Podcast, where you can suggest ideas and themes you'd like the Trap team to discuss. Also remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a 6 out of 5-star review on iTunes. Doing all this really helps us, which means we can do more to help you. Now let's head over to the studio for the latest pile of Trap.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back, dear Trappists, to the Real Advisor Podcast, TRAP. This is episode 6. My name is Nick Lincoln, and joining me as ever in the studio of doom are the 3 other horsemen of the apocalypse, Carl Widger, Andy Hart, and Alan Smith. Gents, we've got a show packed full of very little today, so let's start unpacking it straight away. Andy and I went to Solihull for the PFS festival. Crikey, when was that? Last week, wasn't it? God, it's a week ago. I'm going to talk about it briefly, the PFS festival. Andy, give us your honest feedback on the
Hospital
PFS
pass straight away.
Yeah,
Hospital pass. Yeah, it was a huge event. I would say there was probably 1,500 people there, maybe 2,000. So it was quite well put on and organised. Great networking with fellow peers. Yeah, lots of fun. The sort of drinks was interesting on the Tuesday night. I actually was meant to speak there, but I decided to pull out a couple of months beforehand. The reason being, I don't really think the organisers respect the speakers, which for me is a major no-no. They wanted my talk 6 weeks beforehand in a horrible format that I'm not used to. And I'm a sort of last-minute preparation type character, so my thoughts come together leading up to mic off, as it were. And it's what I do with my conference. I allow people to submit their talks a couple of days beforehand, and I want them happy on stage. So yeah, long story short, I decided to pull out of it. I would have liked to have spoken there. They've got some great stages. And saying that, they were very sort of technical and sort of anal on the format and how you delivered it. And on the day, a lot of the tech didn't even work in a lot of the rooms. So it was slightly disappointing from that point of view. But yeah, it was a well put on festival. I'll probably go again if they invite me. But yeah, great networking. Yeah, what did you think of it, Nick?
I thought you dodged a bullet in pulling out, and credit to your integrity for doing that. I thought it was pretty low grade. I think the PFS have a difficult mandate. They've got such a broad church, and they continually manage just to miss the target. I thought it was appalling seeing people who are at least as long in the tooth as me going round the stands with their goodie bags at the start. It beggared belief as far as I'm concerned. Most of the agenda was pretty poor, but I knew that going in. So this is the idiot Lincoln here, who looked at the agenda, thought it was pretty poor across the board. There were some decent speakers, but generally poor, and I still went. So more for me, I won't be going again.
They also had what I thought was the sort of weakest, most technical speakers on the largest stage, talking about incredibly dry subjects, having an audience of 500 people with bad presenters and bad content. Made no sense to me.
Can I ask, guys, PFS, just for the Irish audience?
Personal
PFS?
Finance Society. Personal Finance Society. It's
Right.
part of the Chartered Insurance Institute, and it's the biggest trade body, if you will, in
it's the
UK.
biggest. It's the biggest by a mile, Carl. I would say 85% of advisors, mortgage advisors, insurance salespeople are part of the PFS and CII. They do all the exams. They do the chartered accreditation. It's our biggest. They do a lot of online stuff. They do a lot of good stuff. This is
the biggest conference of our industry, of our profession.
This is the biggest conference. Yeah, it's free. So obviously you are the product as such.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stands, which is there's nothing wrong with having stand sponsors and exhibitors. You know, you deal with it as you see fit.
Yeah.
There were some new innovative companies that people would enjoy sort of seeing, and I suppose it's for younger people coming into the profession.
That's where it has a place for the if you're going to mop up.
I must say, I had a look
all
at
of the stuff. That's where
agenda,
you go, and then of course eventually you
more,
realize to unlearn it. But the people there were the product. I know that at one stand at the front of the NEC
from them, but
had paid 45 grand to have their stand. That's a lot of money. Yeah, that's a lot of money. There were 30, 40 stands. They want their flesh. And I didn't find it. I won't be going again. And I won't be asked probably once people have listened to this. And that's okay. We're all allowed to be different. So enough with the PFS. Credit to them for at least putting it on. Carl, now I understand, Carl, that you recently paid money. Sorry, got that wrong. You've won an award, Carl. Tell the team how you won this award.
So, are you quite finished with that magnificent introduction, Chairman?
I'm done, my friend.
Yes, Metas Ireland won the Communications Award in the Irish Pension Awards ceremony last week, and we are so excited to have won this because we were up against some of the big providers with obviously big budgets, and communications was a good one for us to win because we have spent a lot of time and effort on our marketing over a long number of years. So yeah, look, delighted to win it. I will say very happy to have a longer and franker discussion about awards and my take on it. But there's one thing for sure. I am absolutely positive now that the Metas Ireland team are champions when it comes to celebrating. Absolute champions. And I'm absolutely sure that we're all so busy this week because we did no work on Friday whatsoever. But look, from do you know what? That was a win, right? Winning the award was fantastic, but actually getting everyone together and having a bit of a celebration and a bit of a hoolie. And we left the venue kind of at about 11 o'clock and went off and made our own fun. And it was just such good fun. But possibly actually in a long list of very good nights out with the team, probably my favorite ever night out. That's how good it was. So yeah, brilliant. And I think a lot. I think a lot of that is we're all kind of happy to be getting back out there and together and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, look, great. But yeah, I think definitely a discussion for the Real Advisor podcast is awards and award ceremonies and all of that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, and brilliant. I mean, I think brilliant achievement, and on a serious note, extremely well done. And I saw when you were tweeting on the night that you won, I did go long on Heineken shares immediately, and managed to get quite a decent profit from that evening. The awards
you
thing.
You should have shorted it because we went on Baby Guinness, right? That's apparently the favorite tipple these days.
We went long on aspirin the next day, though.
Yeah.
We will cover the awards. I think the awards thing is a subject in and of itself, and one that we will come back to in a future
10 minutes on that.
Future episode. Okay, so I'm conscious that as ever with us guys, we're already nearly 10 minutes in. The main theme for this show, dear Trappist, is the solopreneur versus the growing a practice conundrum or debate or thesis. We put out that we were going to talk about this subject for this episode on the various social media channels and got quite an interesting response. People are dead interested to hear about this and how the four of us have fashioned our own businesses and perhaps why. But we're going to lead off with Alan because this was a subject that he wanted to, very unlike Alan, he actually wanted to talk about something and he picked this subject. So Mr. Smith, you start us off with, you take it from there and then we'll see down what flow this goes.
We'll see where it goes. Okay, I need to start by taking you back in time a number of years ago. It's early.
Grab yourself a drink, a very long drink. It's story time with Alan Smith.
Thank you very much, Nick. I still laugh at that. And I have to say a quick aside. Some of my team listened to this podcast. Was not busy enough.
Good.
And I was in a meeting last week and I went to start to say something. And my colleague Tom just said, pour yourself a drink. Bastard. I love you, Tom,
already.
But,
he won't last long at Capital.
No, he's a superstar. Anyway, so, a million years ago when I was starting in business, I think as I've explained before, it literally was a one-man startup business. But I had an idea. And in those days, you're trying to work out what your next step is, what your next move is. And of course, this is back, 18 years ago. There was far less of a kind of a digital world where you could learn a lot more. And so I used to read books about business, and I picked up this book, which is famous, and you may have all read it. Maybe none of you read it, but I would still say it's probably the best business book out there. It's called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And if you haven't read it, the E-Myth, the E stands for entrepreneur. And Michael Gerber, who has been a practitioner, a consultant, an advisor, author, etc., for SMEs, small businesses, for decades and decades, explained this myth that he talks about we're all entrepreneurs. And he uses the classic story, which all of us, I think, to some extent have done. Classic entrepreneur journey, which is you're working for a large company. You remember, Andrew, you were flogging mortgages. Nick, Allied Dunbar, flogging a bit of insurance. You were doing, Carl. And I was working for a large company, and I thought I had this idea of starting my own business.
Alperton, whoa, Alperton.
I still hear. I don't know what
Wembley High Road, wasn't it? Wembley High Road.
Yeah. But that's,
applications.
You're making this story too long.
Wheelbarrow.
No, you're doing that all on your own, Alan.
No, I'll have to come back to that. He's thrown me off. Anyway, the idea of the E-myth is that you're an entrepreneur. And the idea is lots of people, whether you're a hairdresser, a plumber, a financial advisor, you work for a big company, you have this idea you start your own business because you're an entrepreneur. And the reality is for 99.9% of people, what you do is you set up your own business, and not only are you the business owner, you're also the practitioner. Let's just say if you're a hairdresser, you're still cutting people's hair, and then you're doing the accounts at the end of the day, and then you're doing all your negotiating with your landlord for your lease, and you've then got the worst boss in the world, which is yourself, and you haven't really been an entrepreneur at all. You've given yourself a job. And where you're working probably twice the hours for half the pay that you used to have. And he was questioning this whole premise, basically saying most of you lot aren't really entrepreneurs. And here's the model. If you want to be an entrepreneur, this is how you do it. And I just, drank the Kool-Aid. I thought it was a fabulous book. I still think it is a really good book. And he talks about the different sort of hats that you wear. You do have the kind of the practitioner hat, but you also have the entrepreneur hat as well. And you have the sort of strategic planning hat. And all that. And so I just decided early on that I wanted to be more of a sort of growth-focused business owner. And I wanted to, as we aspire to be bigger, to take on more clients, that it didn't just stop with me. There's a natural limit to the number of clients ultimately that you can work with. Technology has improved a lot in the last number of years, but nevertheless, there does remain a natural cap. And I just felt from the beginning, I having worked for a big asset management company historically, I was able to observe what I saw were best practices, the really best businesses out there in the intermediary financial planning, financial advice space. And they weren't the 20, 30, 50 advisor models, and neither were they the one-man, two-man band. The optimum, the sweet spot to me was sort of 4 to 6 advisors, boutique firm, all advisors, high quality individuals, well qualified, good quality people, good client banks, able to generate opportunities, work collaboratively together, and together as a unit. The whole is greater than sum of the parts. So I was all about creating, a small enterprise model, much more so than I ever was a solopreneur. That's the backdrop of the story. But I'm very keen to hear from you two guys in particular why you choose a different route. Andy, why are you operating as a solo?
Yeah, this is a deep subject. I feel like it's get yourself a drink, a very long drink, story time with Andy Hart. A couple of points that you mentioned, Alan. The E-Myth is an absolute superb book. If you're a young person in this business and have not yet read it, read it immediately. It's a mind-blowing book. It changes the way you look at everything to do with business. So we're talking about the solo advisor versus the multi-advisor firm model. I have heard it sort of coined as lifestyle versus enterprise. Financial advice firms are quite unique compared to other businesses for various reasons. I'll just tell you what I'm up to. So I'm a solo advisor. I'm the only appointed advisor at the firm. I sort of have 3 people that help me sort of run the company. I'm pretty much always going to be a solo advisor. I may at some point employ a support advisor, but they'd have to be happy in that role. They wouldn't have the direct client relationships. And then I suppose you've got to look at what's your aims. Because a few people that grow enterprise businesses say that lifestyle businesses have no sale value. And then someone can push back and say, well, I don't want a sale value. I just want to bleed it out of loads of money of income over the next 30 years and be financially independent anyway. Why do I want to sell it? But solo advice firms do have a sale value. And I'd argue that their sale value is on par with multi-advisor firms. Let's just take a random example. Let's say you had 100 clients, 500K each client, that's 50 million AUM, and it was one person and a team of 5 versus 3 or 4 advisors with similar AUMs. I reckon the sale value is going to be similar. I know obviously what I mentioned there was a solo advisor with the same AUM as sort of 3 or 4, so it's sort of not a fair fight. But I think the sale values are still mostly based around AUM. There's various other ways you can slice and dice it. You can do, percentage of recurring income, X of recurring income, X of profits, but usually it works out to be about 4% of assets. I think the 4% of assets is going to come down to 3% of assets because the cost of funding to buy these firms is going to go through the roof. So the sale values are not going to be as attractive as they were. And what's the aim of the game for you? Is it to have a certain amount of income? As I say, I know lots of firms that are solo advisors that are now turning over 500,000. I know a few firms that are turning over 1 million with 1 advisor and 5 support staff. And in terms of how profitable they are, they're off the charts. I know lots of people that run a firm with 30 employees and they'll be lucky to clear in 200-300 grand out of the business every single year. So the other thing as well, I know a lot of advisors that run an enterprise business, and a lot of them are very jealous of the solo firms once they hear the numbers and hear how happy their lifestyles are. Someone who's made a conscious choice to run a solo advice practice a few years into it, I've very rarely heard them say, oh, I wish I had 12 staff and was dealing with HR problems every single day. Like, it is a conscious choice to go down the solo advice lifestyle route. And I think a lot of people are happy that they've chosen it. There's various sort of moving parts of it, but yeah, that's a starter for 10 for me. I'll pass over to Carl to say his piece.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks, Andy. For me, it's a little bit different. I didn't read any book like Alan and decide, I wanted to be a firm that has staff and try and build something that we can sell or anything like that. It was literally, I think I've referred to it before, I was a necessity entrepreneur. So I had to go out on my own in 2010 because of the financial crisis. Where I was things weren't great or whatever, albeit there were great people at that firm. So I just made the call, 4 kids, I need to be master of my own destiny here. So I set up on my own. I had to make 8,000 euros a month in fees, commissions, however it was going to happen. That's what had to come in for me to be able to feed my kids and pay the mortgage and all that kind of stuff. And I was able to do it, but it was bloody hard and it was bloody stressful. And what I found after the first maybe 9 months was that there was some parts of being a solo I really did not like doing. For example, writing the reports or dealing with the insurance companies or the pension providers, whatever. And I hired staff member number 1 at that stage, not because I had this vision of building a big business, but because I really hated doing that job. Interestingly, in our celebrations the other night, in a random pub in Dublin, I happened to bump into employee number 1, Tim Fine is his name, and we had a drink together, and great guy, still a great friend of mine. But Tim and I were talking about, the pressure that I was under at that time. And it was significant pressure. And
have we got a violin noise to play, Nick?
Yeah, it was, but
yeah.
fair to say that at that time I had no idea what being a leader or being visionary was about. I was like, what's the next sale? And let's drive it on. And it literally started evolving from there, whereby when I had a few more quid in the bank, I'd hire somebody else. And that's how employee number 3 came along, et cetera, et cetera. And it wasn't until kind of 3 years in that I started thinking about it. And that's how my whole journey to real financial planning came about. I started in 2010, and 2014, Meadows was born. So it was only around then that I decided to have a look at, okay, is this really what I want to be doing? Flogging insurance products, telling people that I know what the best pension fund was. So that's how it kind of evolved. Now, since roll it on then a couple of years when I realized that real financial planning was a real thing. It added real value. It gave me a great buzz. I loved doing it. I loved dealing with families. Then I started thinking, okay, how can we scale this thing? And I went on a course it was called the Munster High Performance Leadership course. So it was run by Munster Rugby. And that was absolutely transformational for me. And the big lesson I got out of that, there was lots of different modules in it, but there was one about leadership. And it was, they were going through styles of leadership, and they put up the first one, and it was called pace setting. And it was, it's like that leader is to follow me, do it as I'm doing it. And, look at the energy I'm bringing, look at all the hours I'm working. And I was like, yeah, that's me. Isn't this magnificent? And they were like, and that is a terrible way to try and lead any organization. And I was like, okay. And then they put up different styles. But the one that I really wanted to be was the visionary leader. And how can I get, I suppose, a bunch of people to buy into a vision and everyone going towards that one vision. And guys, it's that's how I went from solo to Metis Ireland and trying to have a team and bring it all the way to last Thursday night, where we all sat in a room where there was awards being given out for things that we did not believe in. And we all were definitely on the higher moral ground and saying, that's terrible. But that was really inspiring for me. I do honestly 100% believe that there's a team of us now rowing in the same direction. And I very much believe in that. And I very much want to try and scale that if I can at all, because it's a mission that I believe in. But I did not set out to create something of value. Still, that's not really, huge on my agenda. It's more, how can we bring this to more people? And one of the things, Andy, that I just push back on slightly would be the valuations, that if you have, one advisor and 3 staff and 50 million or whatever. So what we've done here is we create a pod system. So every advisor, we call them private client manager, has a financial planner. I think you guys call them paraplanners, and then has a client service executive as well. So an admin person. But some financial planners and some client service execs serve on more than one pod. So they serve for more than one private client manager. So therefore, there is scalability that you've missed. Now, the flip side of that, I suppose, is we do have a head of compliance. We do have a head of finance. So there are functions that a solo would definitely not have. But I think if you're interested in scaling, there's nothing worse than kind of being caught in the middle. So being between solo and not really enterprise and not really knowing which way I want to go. So I think for anyone actually interested in this topic and considering their own career choices, I think you're either all in on either case. Don't be dipping your toe in the water, because I think you'll get lost, you'll get a bit muddled, and you'll end up doing tons of roles or tons of jobs that you don't really want to, if you're kind of half and half between both. But so yeah, I'm probably a little bit different. I've done both. I definitely enjoy trying to be, whether I am or I am, and trying to be that visionary leader. I definitely enjoy that role an awful lot more than the very, very high pressure environment of when I set out as a solo myself.
Two things quickly. First of all, Nick, can Carl take over as the storyteller extraordinaire now? And I need a new jingle.
No.
Jeez,
that was good. That was good, Carl.
Quick question for you, Carl, before we listen to Mr. Lincoln's take on this. Are you still what I call on the tools? Do you have client responsibilities yourself? Do you advise clients directly?
Yeah.
You do.
Amazingly, we had our chairman in today and our head of finance, and we sat down. We were doing budget 2023, and that's the one big thing that they're saying to me: you gotta start revving back. However, there are two problems with that. One is a lot of the client relationships have been there for years and years and years.
Okay.
And then the second one is, that's the bit I love doing most. Right. And I know, and Nick and I have had this conversation that, well, then why did you try and build this firm? Why didn't you just do, I don't know, because I do love doing that, but I also love the challenge of trying to build a firm. But nothing gives me the buzz of doing financial plans with people.
Just before Nick chips in, me and Alan know quite a lot of people that run firms in the middle, and they've got these deluded views about things, haven't they, Alan? Where there's sort of 3 or 4 of them, and they have quarterly reviews and employee feedback surveys. It's like, look,
there's an element of over-engineering. Yeah,
over-engineering. Most businesses in this space are micro. Even if you've got 20 people, in the grand scheme of businesses, it's tiny. And when someone's got 3 or 4 staff members, they are just the stuff they come out with, and the employee feedback surveys every quarter, and anonymous replies. And I'm thinking, how big's your firm? What, 300 people? And like, no, we've got 6. I'm like, why are you even thinking about this? Just get out and do the work. Anyway, over to you, Nick, who is the ultimate solo advisor.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of it comes down to personality types as well, as much as what you want out of the business. So I left an insurance company in 2001 and became an IFA, working for a sort of medium, micro bit, very typical high street IFA firm. 3 or 4 advisors, 4 or 5 admin people the advisors were all male, the admin were all female, and it was what it was. But by 2008, I had this vision of what I wanted to do, which was proper full fat financial planning for everybody with no exceptions. Having had my epiphany moment with Paul Armstrong, and I thought I can't do this within this firm. They were 3 plus a half. They weren't bad, but they were brokers. They were group personal pensions. They couldn't say no to anybody, and it was old school in that sense. And I thought, they're never going to get this, so I went out on my own. But I have this thing; it's a psychological trait. I can't remember if I've talked about this on the show or not before. I don't think I have. And Chris Budd, who we all know, famous at the minute for his employee enterprise trust kind of work. But Chris Budd once diagnosed me as having something called a high internal locus of control. And I'd never heard of that, so I Googled it. And it's a psychological term for people that are very inner directed. We tend to be, and again, you have to make broad brush assumptions here when you're talking. If you don't generalize, you don't get anywhere. So I'm going to generalize. But generally, people fall into 2 categories. They're either inner directed or they're externally directed. And I'm not saying one is right or one is wrong, but if you have a high internal locus of control, you're inner directed, and you don't really care what other people think, and you don't really seek external validation. Now, if you take that to the nth degree, you're going to end up a sociopath. I don't think I'm quite there yet, but I am confident in my own skin and I'm working my own way there. I'm confident in myself generally, and I'm confident that if I get something right, I will feel good about it. And if I get something bad, I'm okay with that as well, being totally on me. I don't need external validation. And I'm not I think the word entrepreneur is I think an entrepreneur, you've got to be a disruptor. I think if you're a small business owner, that's what you are. You're a small business owner. Unless you're doing something really disruptive and special.
They say you own your job. You own your job, basically.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So I wouldn't classify myself as a solopreneur, but I do love being a solo practice advisory firm for various reasons, most of which could be interpreted in a negative light. So I love it for the fact that I don't have KPIs. I don't have performance reviews with other members of staff. I don't have office politics. I don't have to deal with HR and payroll and maternity leave and paternity leave and the other stuff that can go on with a big firm. I know that all the advice in my firm is consistent, and every client gets the same experience from start to finish because it's only me doing it. And I haven't got to worry, what are my RIs doing under me? And
can I ask a question?
The costs are kept down. Go on.
I just think this through from a practical viewpoint. And as much as I'm saying I had this grand vision, and I did have an idea of a bigger business. I never anticipated being a solo business from day one, but there was an evolution that came with it, because you're not about to go and hire loads of staff where you haven't got the revenue to support it. But I find myself just being very, very busy. And it was a particular time of change in the industry. So coming up, to clients with sensible evidence-based investment propositions, with things like platforms, when they weren't used to any of this. So there was great opportunity to attract a lot of new business, and as a consequence, we won lots of new clients, and I just found myself at capacity to the extent that, looking back in those years, I lost loads of client opportunities because I literally didn't call them back because there wasn't enough time in the day. I was doing 12-hour shifts on a regular basis. Then I found myself, the only way I can continue this, I either close the door and say no more clients until I sort of work this way through, or I hire somebody. I was introduced to a colleague of mine, still works with me now, super guy called Graham, qualified advisor. He joined me. He took up some of the slack, and we carried on, and then we hired another guy, Charles, and he's still with me, and on it goes. And so my question, I guess, so part of it was directed, and part of it was just a reaction to being the ability to grow the business through organic new business opportunities. For those of you who are running your own shows, I come back to this thing, there's a natural cap. What happens if either of you, I'll ask you, Andy, what happens if something just, there was a change of legislation or something, and you had 80 new business inquiries next week? New people said, I'd love to come and become a client of yours. I've read all your stuff, listened to your podcast. When can I sign up? How would you deal as a solo practitioner with volume at any given time?
It's never going to happen.
All right, next question. That's why I didn't ask you, Nick. But I'm just put it another way. Are you at you're not at capacity? You've got a website. You can go and sign up and become a. So are you always therefore suboptimal in terms?
I don't know.
Hours you've got relative to clients you could take on. If you've always got capacity, you're never at maximum. What's your overflow strategy? How do you turn people down? Do you have a waiting list? Because that is the challenge with a solo business. There's no one else.
I mean, I'm quite unique. I run 3 different businesses, so it's a bit of a weird story. I'm not all in on Maven Advisor. It's just naturally, organically growing. I only want to take on maybe another 15 clients.
Yeah,
and that business will be...
Andy, the ultra-crepidarian Andy. He knows about everything, Andy. Can't be told anything. His name is Andrew Hart. Andrew Hart.
Andrew, my dear friend, you can either be unique or you cannot be. You cannot be quite unique, but do continue anyway.
I like it. Well, the good thing about being a solopreneur, solo advisor, my colleagues can't take the piss out of that jingle for me when we have a team meeting. That's one.
We do enough of that for you.
Yeah, exactly. I'll get it on WhatsApp groups and other stuff. The fact that I don't have a big team and work with people, I'm certainly not lonely. I'm inundated with communications from.
I don't mean lonely. How do you deal with
people?
How do you deal with capacity?
I'm just flagging it up as an issue.
No one said you were lonely.
Together. No, I'm just flagging it up.
Need to say it's kind of obvious, isn't it?
But me and Nick don't work together, but we discuss cases all the time. So yes. I have a loose advisory board with me. I'm going to see this client next week. I'm thinking about doing this strategy. Have I missed anything? So again, as a solo advisor, once you've got a group of people that you refer to, it fills that role of having, opening the office door and discussing a live case with people if people still do that. Yeah, I'm only looking to take on probably about another 15 families, so I just take on wealthier and wealthier clients. That's the business we're in. So yeah, over to you, Nick.
And then what? Then you close the door. That's it. Done.
No, I'll readjust at the time. I'll work out then what I'm going to do, just like you guys have done. I know Carl was saying you got to choose one or the other, but Carl originally chose the solo route, and then it presented to him that that's not his ideal choice. He wants to build it, and the same thing happened with you guys. That might happen with me. That's not going to happen with Nick, because obviously he's a little bit older than me, and he's purposely decided to choose that lifestyle. Whereas I've got a few more years ahead of me in the tank, so there might be well, I'm going to take Nick's business over. So once I buy Nick out at some point down the line, then I'll probably have a
Can I throw in a question?
Yeah.
Do you feel, and this is a genuine question, do you feel that myself and Alan are taking more risk than you guys are? And is that one of the reasons why you stayed as a solo? That there's less risk doing what you guys do?
I never looked at that from that point of view. I just looked at it as a less, keep the costs down, keep the keep the profit margin high, and the risk thing didn't come into it. I think both business models have their own form of risk. I think as a solopreneur, there might be something somewhere in the compliance world you just do not know about because you've always done it your way, and there's no other voice telling you to do it another way, and you're going to miss something. Now, I know Andy and I, we use compliance contractors to bring compliance into our business. So we're always on top of what we should be doing. But there's always that nagging thing. I'm on my own here. I'm doing these suitability letters. I'm doing these client files to justify my advice. Actually, how tight are these? But that's the other risk for you guys with multiple RIs. I would be always thinking, what is Jane doing right now with that client? Is she following the investment thing? Is she actually going through the full fat financial process all the time? Is she cutting corners? Is she disclosing her fees in the way that we all should be doing? So there are different kind of risks. Like you can't ameliorate risk out. Regulated financial advice must be the most regulated profession in the Western world. I think more so than doctors and brain surgeons. And you're never going to get rid of the risk. I think just the two different business models we're talking about today carry different risks. Andy,
I think you're taking on a lot more risk. We need to define risk because that word needs to be unpacked. I think you're taking on a way more responsibility, whether or not you want to do that or not, and you're taking on a shed load more hassle. But surely the idea is you're going to sell your businesses for a bigger amount than if you would have stayed solo. You know, we can't lose sight of the fact that this is business at the end of the day, and probably what you guys are building will be able to sell for a bigger number than what me and Nick can put together. So yeah, that's also.
I think there's one other thing that I personally really value, and that is time freedom. I've now got. I'm in the fortunate position where I've got what the experts and coaches call a self-managing business. So I took 5 weeks off in the summer.
You're about six times more busy than Nick. I'll tell you that.
But most of that is self-generated. I don't have it's the stuff I don't have to do. But what I do know is I could take weeks and weeks off. I could take a couple of months off, and the whole thing would just run along. And I value that. I really do, which I can't do from a sole business, sole trader. So I think the summary is one's not right, one's not wrong. And I think it was Carl who said early on in his very eloquent speech was you don't want to be caught between the two. Because there is, I think there's that sort of 5 to 10 headcount company that's just awkward. It's not. One of the biggest challenges I had was when I took on my first, what was then a kind of, we called it office manager, but sort of operations person just so non-fee generating and non-supporting the fee generators, but just making shit happen, getting organized. And I thought, how can I justify that? Pay a salary to someone who doesn't actually generate fees. But that was a game changer. I had to bring that in, and all of a sudden took care of all the little bits and pieces that you need to have. Yeah. But before that, you're looking at your revenue and your profits, and you think, I can't really afford to do that. I'll carry on doing it myself. So there are these awkward moments as you go through, and every business does. I guess you get to 10 staff, 15, 20, everything, 30, 50, 100. They're all different moments where there's ceilings of complexity, as they call them. But the moral of the story is decide early. I think you do. You say you can evolve it and just decide as you go along. I think you should.
That's what most people do. They accidentally create these companies over the years. It takes a long time.
I disagree. Maybe financial services.
You've been in business 18 years.
But I've achieved what I planned to do. I never wanted to have 20 advisor business. I never wanted to be a sole trader. I got to a sort of, in our world, it's a micro, tiny company, but in financial services, it's sort of mid.
Yeah, Alan, but you definitely have been intentional. I think, most IFA businesses are accidental businesses because they just got there to that size. Whereas you had a vision and you stuck to it. So it is possible to do what you've done because you've done it.
It definitely growing that wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
Can I ask another question? Do you guys, as solos? I know how ambitious both of you are. Is there not some ambition in you to be able to try and scale the really great work that you're doing? And maybe that's the question. And maybe there's a subsection of that. Is that why, Andy, for example, you're doing Humans Under Management and you have the other brands going as well? And I know, Nick, you're doing some consultancy.
So again, for financial advisors that want to grow an enterprise business, say stuff like we want to help more people, it's very hard to scale because most firms are sort of high end, and they're even if they're dealing with a load of client families, it's 200 families at the max or something like that. So then the pushback could be, we'll just give away financial education for free. There's various channels that you can do it. I'm sure I'm reaching more people with Maven Money than pick a group of other people that say that they run huge enterprise businesses. So in terms of scale and leverage, in 2022, you can reach more people by doing different things to growing a financial advice firm. I mean, as I say, I'm in a bit of a weird situation because I run a couple of businesses. I've got D2C businesses, which is direct to client, and then I do a lot of stuff in the advisory space. Again, I'm trying to help more financial advisors, which inadvertently help more clients. If I can help 1,000 financial advice firms, which I'll probably do over my career, each one of those looks after 100 families. That's quite a lot of loose impact I've had. So
100,000.
Yeah, I'm not. Sorry,
100,000.
Yeah. Okay.
Nick,
He
what about you?
Those sums off the top of his head.
Yeah. Nick, what about you? You're quite happy to plough your own furrow.
Yeah, I am happy to plough my own furrow, and I don't think it's scalable what we do. I really don't. I think people are buying me, human beings buy human beings, and I just don't think I'd be able to bring someone into my business and say, this is how we do it, and you must follow this prescribed, because everyone's got their own personality and will want to stamp their little quirk on it, and that would probably drive me mad because I'm an OCD control freak. I've just got some other points about being the solo business owner. There are loads of plus points, but there are also, and Alan and Carl, I'm sure you're the same, but I can never really totally switch off. I'm always thinking about the business, and I'm sure you get that as well, even though you're running bigger concerns and you can delegate stuff out, but I certainly can't do that. So I'm always thinking about it. So I have to be very intentional at the weekends. I turn my emails off. I don't look at it because I just cannot go down that. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole. Yes, the isolation. I think Andy mentioned that him and I kind of work together and we run things by each other. We're kind of an advisory board to each other. Thank God for technology now, where we can do things where you can be in contact with your peers, WhatsApp groups, whatever, Zoom. You can always just reach the email groups and so forth. So you've got those resources. So although we are one-man bands by definition and by our regulatory status, in practice we've got a whole peer group that we can lean on that you couldn't have done 15 years ago. So that does make it a bit easier. And in terms of sale value, yeah, I don't listen. Will my business have a sale value? Will it not? I don't know. It could be that my business is high profit margin. I'll retain the profits and then just wind the company up and just extract the profits. I've got a client of mine who's in media, his own business, and he's got retained profits now he's got about 1.8 million in the company. It's got no sale value. He is the business. So, and he knows that, and he's just going to work until he has had enough, and then he's just going to extract the profits that way. And I know with financial services, you've got to be a bit more careful doing that. You can't just dump your clients out there into the open world. So I'll find a way to hand them on to someone who I trust and like. Yeah, trust and like.
If only you could think of anyone.
I knew it began with an A, but I couldn't.
Who was a bit younger than you? Who was.
That's right.
Someone who's
Andrea,
a bit. What you need is
Radler, nice lady.
What you need someone who's a bit unique is what you need. If only there was someone.
Why don't we join
unique.
up the four firms?
Oh, yes. Back the front of house. I'll do the discovery meetings. Let me do.
Can I be the boss?
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine having to tell Andy Hart his compliance was wrong. Call him into a room.
Oh yeah,
your file needs to be fixed.
Yeah. Final point on this: I work really well on my own. I love coming to the office on my own, turning everything on my own, getting on my own, having a meeting. I couldn't think of anything worse of arriving at the office and 5 people rocking up, or they're already here. I couldn't think of anything worse.
Yeah, we're all made differently. But I think going back to and we can wrap this up now. This came from there's a couple of people. Generally younger advisors, some working in larger companies, but got sort of entrepreneurial ambition. And there's, I hear stories, off on the grapevine and so on about, 2 or 3 people. Should we get together, 3 of us together as a startup IFA, that we could be quite good. But there's positives and negatives. I think my takeaway from this is there is no right and wrong answer. You should have a clear vision. I think you should say, well, there's a bunch of us should get together. We'll have a decent sized business, or for all the good reasons you guys have said, no, it's not for me. I reserve the right to change my mind, but I'm certainly going to kick off as a sole practitioner and take the positives and the negatives with that. So hopefully that was of some help to those who asked the question.
Final point. I think the ultimate combination to start with is someone who wants to be client-facing financial planner role and someone who wants to be more operations that does know the power planning stuff. I've seen that work really well. So two people, one person's operations, the other person's a bit more front of house. And the operations person couldn't think of anything worse of sitting down in front of clients, and the front of house couldn't think of anything worse of dealing with all the regulatory stuff.
That could be great.
That works really well. I think maybe three would mix it up a bit too much. The two people that are happy with those clearly defined roles. Sorry, Carl, over to you.
No, I just wanted to say it's whilst there's no clear defined way of going forward. Clearly, myself and Alan won this argument because we've been talking about this in WhatsApp all week.
Right, what's next, Nicholas? Time's marching on.
Oh, indeed it is, friends. So it's 45 minutes in. I think we'll that'll be our main subject for this episode. The time is flying by. Let's go on to the questions we've got from our beloved Trappists, and the first one we're going to do this week. Just pulling his name out of my magic sack. Andy Reynolds, who's on Twitter as @Andy_Reynolds. Well done, Andy. You must have got a marketing agency in for that one. Well done on the new podcast, guys. 2 episodes in and loving it so far. Future topic idea, the best / most important tech that you use in your respective practices. Okay, this could be a subject. So I'm going to just put Voyant and Calendly, and I can't say any more than 2. That's me, Andy Hart.
Is he only said 2?
Yes, that's what 2 episodes. Well,
No,
he
honestly,
said,
I don't know where
use?
to start.
Why don't you just choose 2 then? And one of them can't be Voyant.
Right, come back.
You've done now, and you stumped.
Okay, well, listen, Carl's
Voyant and Voyant go.
Carl's our man for tech.
As you all know, I'm like big on the tech, and you don't have to school me on the tech at all. I'm gonna say like I'm at the cutting edge, so I'm gonna say iPhone and email.
That's an answer.
That shows
definitely an answer.
Type of, yep. I mean, for me, Text Expander is an absolute wonder. So I'm going to go with Text Expander. I'll think of a second.
Okay, Alan.
I presume Andy was talking about practice stuff, what you have in your businesses around the practice management technology supporting.
Well, but the whole thing, it could be, it could be what's your email application? How do you schedule meetings? How do you store your files? Is there a scan? It's just anything.
Oh, God, well, again, that is a subject in itself.
Yeah, it is.
So, I mean, we use all of the above. In fact, we in January, we've got a project just to streamline our technology because we've layered technology upon technology. We've got 3 different cash flow systems used for different things. We use Cash Calc, we use Truth, and we use Timeline, but people use them for different parts of the process. And all the others that you would expect. There's a couple of interesting, for years and years and years, most of us have moaned about the lack of modern technology available for practice management. A couple of really interesting evolutions coming through. Anthony Villas, shout out to Anthony Villas at First Wealth for doing his open advice piece of technology. Have you seen that, Andy? Have you seen the demo of it?
They are exhibiting. They're exhibiting at Humans Under Management London. Yeah, I think they're going to do great work.
It's really good. I believe. I don't want to I don't want to say anything. I'm not sure quite where they're at yet, but we certainly looked at piloting that. That's from a financial planning company. Built their own, fed up with lack of solutions, so we built our own. That's hopefully going to be very, very interesting. And there's another one out there called Advice Bridge, which we have dabbled with as well, which is a new innovative technology about how to. We all face challenges with onboarding new clients, and it's all a bit of a faff and paperwork.
Aren't you an investor? Aren't you an investor in Advice Bridge? Shouldn't you make that clear?
Couldn't possibly say. As you know, I'm an angel investor. I'm a multi. What did they say? Serial entrepreneur, angel investor. But the last one I'm going to say, the best piece of technology I've seen in the last couple of years is Canva. I think Canva's brilliant.
I love Canva.
Yeah, Canva's good.
We create our own instead of we just create our own documents nowadays.
I think she's the richest self-made person in Australia. She's worth about 3 billion. It's probably
it's Australian.
She originally Australian.
It is a fantastic piece of kit, and even the free service is very, very good, and the paid for one is better.
Obviously you'd be on the free service.
So that's my answer to that.
Anything
Okay,
else?
good.
The final bit of tech I'm going to mention is Squarespace. All of my websites are built on Squarespace. It's a superb all-in-one web platform. If anyone's looking to build a website pretty quickly.
And again, very, very cheap.
Great
If you want
stuff.
cheap, you get it.
Oh, God.
Next.
All right. Now, boys, play nicely. We've got a question from Sean Banks. I think we should have a quick go at it, should we, or not? Okay. Sean Banks, friend of the show, friend of all of us in the digital studio Doom. He's on Twitter at Sean Banks FP, Foxtrot Papa. What are the group's thoughts on exit strategies for business owners, big consolidators, MBOs, EOTs, etc.? There's a big transition happening across the profession. What will this look like for owners, employees, and clients? Cheers, chaps. If we're going to answer it, I think we just limit it to Carl and Alan for the purposes of brevity. Unless, Andy, you've got something really good to say. Carl?
No, nothing to comment.
Limited experience here in Ireland because there's been very little consolidation, mergers, acquisitions, that kind of stuff in the financial services space. However, it seems like there is some movement coming, and interestingly, from PE firms in the UK. So there's kind of two models in terms of how they're valuing businesses, which is a multiple of recurring income and then also a multiple of EBITDA. And most of the firms in Ireland don't show much or any profit. So it was all recurring income is what they were trying to build. And I think it's interesting because, the other valuing a business on its profitability is big boy stuff. And it's like, okay, you got to make sure that your business is actually real and making profits or whatever. So look, I don't have much to say here other than definitely interesting times ahead. And I'm glad that I have the connections in the UK that you guys have introduced me to.
Okay. Alan?
It's a huge subject. It would demand, if anyone wanted it, almost a whole episode like we've done on this one about it. I think it's interesting. I think whether you are a mature business owner like me or whether you're sort of next generation coming through looking to take over is relevant to our entire sector. The challenge is that these financial planning practices, these scrappy businesses that I started up, Carl started up, and people of my generation started up years ago, never thinking they'd be worth anything. Turns out they're worth millions of pounds in the end, predominantly because of the recurring revenue model, which is very attractive to anyone, any acquirer, which is why technology businesses with recurring income streams are popular. And what the last number of years has shown, particularly COVID, even the current market, is that the revenue is pretty sticky. Yes, it might go up and down a bit, but clients tend not to fire you too often. So buyers like it. There's inherent value. So great for business owners, a challenge for the next generation, because very few people I know who are sort of in their 30s, for example, have got a few million quid rattling around in the bank account. So there's a real dilemma right now. And it feels to me that's being kicked down the road every couple of years because business owners do want to sell, but they want to get fair value. It's only right they create the economic security for themselves and their families. And right now, the only natural source, or not the only, but the sort of dominant natural source is private equity-backed consolidators who tend to have
like
deepest
20
pockets.
firms in the market.
There's at least 20 active firms. There's more than that, actually. There's a lot. So it's a seller's market
active
right now. I mean, some of the prices that I have seen quoted recently, I don't know, I haven't gone in depth to it, but some of the stuff I see online quoted is just nuts. 5, 6, 7, 8 times revenue, not profit. So that creates a natural challenge. So I know a bit about that world. I'm not an expert. I've learned a lot about it in the last couple of years. There does seem to be some interesting new entrants to the market who are less. The private equity model, if you understand it, it's just a relatively aggressive model. They're generally raising capital as part of a fund. There's a 5 to 10 year turnaround. They have to make what they buy, make it far more profitable by increasing revenue and reducing costs. And you know how they were going to do that. And then they return the money to their investors 5 or 10 years down the line at looking for something like 20% annualized returns. And that's quite hard to do in what is our lifestyle type business with real people and real clients. There are some new entrants to the marketplace that are taking, the phrase patient capital. So they're taking a much longer investor approach. So it's a watch this space right now. Lots of interesting things going on. And I think the next couple of years we're going to see some new innovation.
Not to be confused by the company who's actually called Patient Capital.
Not to be confused by them, who I don't think are particularly patient, but that's another story.
Okay, are you done, Alan?
On Street.
Okay, excellent. So I think we're going to move on to the final part of the show, what many of us call the culture couch. Mr.
It's
Hart.
Culture Corner. It's corner, not couch.
Culture Couch Corner. I've got it in brackets on my thing. I should Culture Corner. Okay, Culture Corner. Sorry. Well done for picking me up, Mr. Hart. You've got the Swindled podcast in the the agenda.
I've got a podcast recommendation. I actually support this guy on Patreon. I pay him $10 a month. I think he's doing great work. It's called Swindled Podcast, and he covers all the scams that you are aware of over the years, but also a lot that you're not aware of. He's got at least 50 or 100 on there. Very well produced, all done by himself. Yeah, it's called Swindled Podcast, as in swindled scam. That's the spelling of it, like it's in swindled. I recommend checking it out. It's decent. I've pretty much been through all of them. Yeah, I'm a big fan of his work.
Good stuff. And I look forward to you telling me how else you spell swindle, apart from spelling it as swindle. Mr. Smith, Business Breakdowns podcast. Charles Schwab.
Yeah, this is really good. If anyone's interested in listening to exactly as it suggests, the name suggests, business breakdowns, so they take all sorts of different businesses from all different industries and just kind of unpack them. Usually get an analyst in and say, how do they make their money? What's their profit centers? What's their value proposition? Where their clients come from? All that. I just find it really, really interesting. But the one that really caught my eye or caught my ear was the one about Charles Schwab himself, who, for those who know, is a huge organization in the US, named after the founder, one of the few organizations of its size to still have the founder's name above the door, which they actually say is very, very relevant and important to the actual the morals and the value of the organization. At last count,
he used to appear in a lot of the adverts, didn't he?
I think he did. Yeah, $7 trillion with a T dollars assets under management, on which they charge almost nothing. They mentioned in this podcast, they mentioned Hargreaves Lansdown a few times. Obviously, a US-based podcast, but it's an English analyst talking about it. Mentions Hargreaves a few times.
What, and how them being so profitable?
Well, no, entirely different business model. Business model. Hargreaves are capital light. They make their money from charging platform costs, trading costs, all that stuff. Very profitable, but hugely under pressure the next few years. Schwab makes almost 70% zero
profit.
Almost, yeah, and I think the point of this is companies like Hargreaves are going to face some challenges going forward because of their business model. More and more, in the US is 5 or 10 years ahead of us, isn't it? In a lot of this stuff, a lot of the trading costs have gone to zero. Custody costs are zero.
So sorry, where does Charles Schwab make their money?
Good question. How do you think? What do you think they can make 70-80% of their revenue from? And it's a $7 trillion business, listed company, S&P.
Please don't say flat fees.
Cash margin. The money they've got on the cash account, there's a lot of debate about this in the UK as well, about these billion%.
Whoa.
And it's like, thropping happen here, thropping happens there. But if you've got $7 trillion, of which at any given time, 2 or 3% is on cash, and they're taking the little margin for what they're paying out versus what they're keeping, fully disclosed. And it's just very interesting about positioning costs and fees, because the customers don't mind, because instead of getting 1% on your interest, you're getting 0.1, but I'm getting free trading, free custody, free everything on the platform. So it feels better versus a Hargreaves model where you're charging 60 basis points, whatever they charge for their platform cost. And Hargreaves are taking a margin. It's not just Hargreaves, it's a lot of all the platforms. It's worth an hour of your time to listen to that Schwab conversation on that podcast. It's excellent.
Okay, great stuff.
Another podcast very similar to Business Breakdowns is called Acquired. Also really, really good and in-depth analysis of businesses.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for that. And as ever, dear Trappist, all the links to these will be in the show notes. Carl, you've got a podcast. I believe this podcast was inspired by our podcast, but somehow they've got to 102 episodes. What's your culture corner?
And I think 12 million.
Don't get hung up on the numbers.
The all in.
Is it 12 million every episode? Jesus Christ!
I thought you told me that, so I'm
just made it up. 12 million, 1,200.
Anyway, the story behind
it's called a heartism. We'll call it heartism. Could be true. Could be just made up. Right.
Yeah.
Go on, Carl.
They're very interesting guys. You guys told me that I absolutely had to listen to it before we started Trap. I didn't, because I don't like taking instruction.
You got there in the end. You always do.
I waited until it was absolutely my decision and not an instruction. I then listened. It is fantastic, right? And the one about the meta problems, the Kanye West meltdown, I just thought it was so well put together, but I loved the way the guys interacted with each other. And they were calling each other out. They were having a little bit of banter and obviously very comfortable with each other, having done it 102 times. And at one stage, one of them is, I watched a bit of it on YouTube. One of them is leaning back and yawning as someone is talking. I went, that's being comfortable with each other. But it's very, very entertaining. But I thought the content was really engaging too. So yeah, I highly
it's really insightful about what's going on in their world in sort of Silicon Valley and all that kind of VC thing. Very, very informed people just having a good debate. And I think, but you can learn a lot from that. That actually applies to our day-to-day life as well. So it's good.
Talking of banter, the weather has turned. It's got a little bit cold. These three guys are wearing V-neck jumpers. I've obviously got the latest fashion of the zip one.
Are we going to add the sartorial corner, the Andy Hart, the bold
we can cut that bit out, Nick, can't we?
It's just an age divide thing. Don't worry about it. It's just an age divide thing. I think Carl's the nearest 12 years old.
I think.
Right, I've got other things to do.
You gibbering here. By the way, just closing on the All In podcast episode and how Meta's problems. If you ever wonder if there is a God, Meta being in meltdown, maybe there is a God after all.
Well, that's either going to be the...
Can I just say, a very interesting thing about, they were talking about investment from companies. So Alphabet are struggling to find ways to invest their money, to actually spend their money. And one of their ideas was an elevator to the moon.
Yeah.
This is like crazy shit.
That's solving a problem.
Yeah.
That's a moonshot. Think big, Carl.
Let's invest in FANG.
Yeah. All right, guys. I think we've drawn this out. Again, it's on the hour mark. We had one major topic there. I think we gave that a really good going over. Thanks as ever, gents, and I will see some of you at Hum. This episode will be coming out the day after Hum. Otherwise, I will see you all three of you, in the Digital Studio of Doom for the next episode of Trap. Please do leave a 6 out of 5 star review on iTunes, like and subscribe on YouTube, and continue pumping away those questions. We're building up quite a big bank of questions now. One day we'll have an episode perhaps where we just go through those. So don't feel we're not addressing your question. We will come to it. On that note, guys, love you all. Take care and goodbye.
Good luck, Andy, at home. Cheers, guys.
Thanks.